Hello. Let's take a look at a very curious take on the Waite-Smith style deck. This is an abstract interpretation by Victoria Iva called the Black Tarot. This front piece is her Fool card. You can see the Fool is balancing on this long pole. A dog-like creature is at the bottom. The Fool seems very carefree despite his precarious situation. And we do see a luminary in the sky as we do on the Smith Fool, but it is much more distant, much more pale than what we see in Smith's illustration. And you're going to see that throughout this Black Tarot deck, in that all of the images, if it's a person, if it's a creature, it's going to have that blurry feel that the characters do there. And if there is a source of illumination, it will be dimmed and almost sinister in the way that it is presented. So if you like a deck that is a bit darker, that can be read with a little more gloominess or ominous overtone, the Black Tarot is a fabulous choice for you. The book for the Black Tarot is substantial. It was written by an associate of mine here in Atlanta. His name is Philip Young. He is not only a great tarot reader, but also an excellent astrologist. And he can be accessed through his website, blackunicorn.com. That's black with a K and then unicorn with a K. And he's very methodical, very precise in the way that he describes and associates numbers, positions, and the meanings of both tarot cards and astrological signs. Now, the suits are mostly named the same as what we have in the Waite-Smith Tarot. The one difference is, instead of pentacles or coins, we have spheres. And this shows up a great deal in the art. You're definitely not looking at coins. You are looking at spherical objects in all of the different interpretations that one might offer those. Sometimes they are seen more like planets. Sometimes it is like an orb that someone is looking into, so you get a reflection. There's a lot of light play in this deck. And you will see that these aces really are not very much like Pamela Colman Smith's drawings. They have a lot more to do with this concept of how light relates to that ace. Even with swords, you see that there's kind of a tail of energy, a pressure, it would seem, that the sword is piercing through on its way down. And the cup is missing all of the embellishment that you'll see in the Waite-Smith deck. I do love that out of all the suits, cup seems to be the brightest. There are some cards that are much more lit up and illuminated all throughout them in the suit of cups, relating to the sense of hope, the sense of spirit that is often applied to that suit. There are some really clear references to Pamela Colman Smith's drawings in this deck, though certainly not in every card. So for instance, this Four of Spheres, again, you see that sense that we really are dealing with spheres here. And the orbs that are not being held by the figure in the center are hanging over its head. So instead of the platform of coins that you see the crowned figure seated upon in Smith's four of coins, or pentacles, I should say, this character has the spheres above him, as if they were all in concert to his advantage, to present a boon to him rather than something that he were perched upon. I really like Iva's interpretation of the Eight of Swords as compared to the Smith version. We still have the figure that seems to be tied up, in this case tied to something, and 4 swords on each side, but vertically rather than being placed all around the figure to show where she is kind of grounded in space. She seems to be hanging almost a wisp that is emerging from the bottom of the card rather than someone who is standing on solid ground. And I do really like that the whole head is a spiral rather than showing a blindfold across her eyes. Her Two of Wands is fairly similar to the Smith Two of Wands. You've got the character with his hand on one staff, though instead of looking out to sea, he is looking to this sort of vague drapery, that there is this sense that things are rolling around and before him, and we're not really sure what his intention or desire may be in relation to this landscape that he's looking out upon. And a loose interpretation of Smith's Seven of Cups. The cups here are on the ground. There is a character in the midground, just like there is in Smith's version. But instead of there being illusory figures that each kind of symbolize a different fortune or desire that a person might have, things they might imagine, instead you've got this arc that seems to be coming across in ribs. It's as if there were some vague force, vague energy that is influencing this person and kind of knocking all of their cognizance into this wispy possibility. So a similar tone to what Smith puts in her cards, but a very different way of depicting that. Now, a lot of them are fairly different, and some of the ones that I am particularly fond of that really drew me to this deck, I mean, other than the fact that my brother gave it to me as a gift, which meant an enormous amount to me, and so that caused me to use it an awful lot. The Seven of Spheres, you see the spheres are tied up in the branches of this tree, or at least related to them, and the ground below the tree is being shattered. You see a figure way there in the background, close to the tree, arms outspread, not really sure if he sees this as disaster or something that has been caused by this person. Overall, I like Iva's tens a great deal. Her Ten of Spheres has the spheres going in many different directions, related to these dark lathes of energy here. And I think the castle in the background provides a nice sense of grounding, kind of a fortress that relates to the solidity that we generally associate with this suit. And the Knight of Spheres, I think, is particularly cool, replacing the horse with a rhinoceros, the sphere underneath the knight as something buried in the ground, surrounded by roots and tendrils, is a really neat image to me. Also, this sense that the rhinoceros may be linked to the ground, being drawn in by the sphere in some way. Her Seven of Wands offers a very different sense of direction and scale than what we see in Smith's Seven. The figure there is almost barely recognizable in this burst of light, falling into what looks like a confusing sloped pattern of checks. Another great 10, a fabulous landscape here, with the wands going far into the background. I really like this liquid effect that she's got going on in the atmosphere, in the sense that there could be characters around a fire, some kind of illumination here in the midground. And this page of spheres is particularly cool, just on fire with potential and passion. I like the way that the background kind of reflects these waves of flame coming off of the body. The Three of Swords, a famous image that has actually, from Smith's drawing, that image of the swords, all three piercing the heart, has been around since the 1500s. We can trace it back to the Solabusca deck. So Iva takes a somewhat different take on this. The sword has cloven an entire body in half, and this core is not being pierced, but instead just hangs there between the halves of the cloven skin, with the two other swords flanking it rather than coming in for the attack. Almost as if there's nowhere for this body to turn, even if it had the strength to gather itself together and move. I like this kind of extreme, stretched out image of the Queen of Swords. I like that her head extends through the entire card, from the neck all the way up to her hair reaching the top edge, and that you really barely have a sense of a face being here. But it's just enough for you to tell that it's a face. And the Knight of Swords with what could very well be a bull rearing up above the sword. And the very vagueness of the figure presenting a sense of that motion, a sense of the dynamic power that we usually see in the Knight of Swords. And like I said earlier when we were looking at the Ace of Cups, this suit has the most light, the most brightness portrayed in its various cards out of any of the ones that Iva's illustrated. This 9 to me is just wonderful, both in the sense of impact that is surrounding around the cups, as well as what looks like a drop. Could be blood, could be poison. It is surrounded by darkness, almost seems like a wound in the card. And a curious choice that you could go in a lot of directions with for her Court of Cups. They're generally fish people. This is her Page of Cups, a mer person. Her Queen of Cups has suckered tendrils coming down her body, so either she is being kind of swept into this octopoidal mass or is one with it. I do appreciate that she's got the cup held way up. And again, a lot more light than we see on the majority of the cards. Her trump cards or major arcana are significantly departed from Waite's vision. We don't see any trace of the kinds of symbols that Waite was using in order to pack his cards with meaning. Rather, we get these rather obscure character images that have very distorted bodies, or bodies that are fading into the background. The Magician here, I appreciate that she gives it a strong sense of obfuscation. The Magician is shrouded completely in darkness, though what he holds out is this point of light. The perspective and scale on this chariot, I think, are great. The way that she sparingly but very effectively uses this checked landscape I find just awesome in all of the cards, and the way that it creates a sense of contour, a sense of confusion in exactly what shape this ground is. Again, the Hermit is another awesome portrayal of scale and perspective. I like that the Hermit is way up here on this pinnacle, on top of something that seems almost impossible to scale. How exactly could the Hermit have gotten up there without just summoning that precipice beneath himself? And almost the opposite, we have the Hanged Man here. So if you want to think about relationships between the cards, I think this is a great visual contrast between the Hermit and the Hanged Man, hanging off of a precipice that juts from the side of the card, and yet, again, that rare intensity of light is what the Hanged Man seems to be striving toward. And I really appreciate kind of this smoky texture that she's got going on around that light point there. A really cool tower card. The sun throwing a lightning bolt, prominent here. I particularly appreciate that the tower goes all the way from the top to the bottom, yet it is severed in the center in a way where it seems like it could almost just fall back on itself, and yet the break offers this sense of distress to what's going on in the card, just as much as the figures wildly falling through it. And for a final one, her World card harkens back to much older versions of the World card, even from before the Marseille deck, where you would have an image of the world often quartered with seasons or depiction of different geographies in those four quarters, and then an angel or a figure standing on top of the world. But in this case, we've got kind of this world portal swirling around an egg and lightning that changes chromatically as it enters that swirl, breaking the egg open. As if to say that there is more in the world than the boundaries that you are used to would inform you about. In fact, so much more that once you go outside of those boundaries, it's going to feel like you're caught up in energy and power that is well beyond your imagining. There is a lot to think about in this deck. Every image offers multiple interpretations, and when you start seeing them together, the sense of scale, as I was showing you, the contrast of dark and light, the way that the darkness and light comes in circles, comes in straight lines, gives you a lot of things to think about as you're considering interactions between the cards. This has been an incredibly fun deck for me to work with, and like I said earlier, if you want something that is darker, more abstract, that leads itself to a wide range of interpretations with a pretty focused mood, this is a wonderful deck. And another thing that I'll mention is that these cards are nice and thick, they've got a really good feel to them, and they shuffle really well for all of that. And you can see that that they are a little bit reflective as well. You can sort of see the light from my hand bouncing off the card. Very nice backings as well, though you can tell if a card is going to be reversed or not based on the way this back is illustrated. I hope that you are having fun exploring decks with me. I hope that you will let me know what some of your favorites are so that we can talk about them together. Have an excellent day and take care.